Hello again, everyone. So we're just a few minutes past the hour. People may still be joining, and we can expect perhaps some people will sign on late. But it's good to get. I think we should just move ahead and get started with this opening webinar for the online discussion forum on ecologically or biologically significant marine areas in preparation for COP15. So this will be basically the kickoff webinar for this for the forum, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how the forum will work and the logistic aspects of it, which is different than a normal type of virtual meeting. But nonetheless, we'll have some time to discuss that, and we're setting up the forum in a way to facilitate the productive sharing of views as much as possible. Just a reminder again to keep your camera and microphone turned off until we have time at the end for some questions and discussion. But for the moment, it's best to keep your camera off and your microphone off. So my name is Joe Appiat. For those of you who don't know me, I coordinate the work on marine, coastal, and island biodiversity here at the CBD Secretariat, and pleased to have with us the chair of SBSTTA, Hesikio Benitez-Diaz, and the co-facilitators of this online forum, Janos Hennig from Germany. I hope I pronounced that properly, and Mary May from the Seychelles, who will be co-facilitating the online forum for the rest of the week. So I also wish to note that this webinar will be recorded and will be shared with everyone. We understand that this is may not be an ideal time, and certainly not an ideal time for some in some parts of the world. So we will be recording and sharing this webinar with all of the participants. With that, I wish to pass off to our distinguished chair of SBSTTA, Hesikio Benitez-Diaz, to give some opening remarks. Please, Hesikio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, colleagues and distinguished delegates. It is my pleasure as chair of SBSTTA to welcome you to the opening webinar of the online discussion forum on ecologically or biologically significant marine areas, famous EBSAs, in preparation for the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. As we know, the ocean has been continuing to gain large biological profile across the global policy landscape, development of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, as well as other major developments across the global ocean landscape, in particular under the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the UN Ocean Conference, the World Trade Organization, the International Seabed Authority, and deliberations on a new plastic treaty and on a new international instrument for marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. This forum will be another key opportunity to advance discussions on the ocean issues of central relevance to the CBD. As you know, this work was called for SBSTTA in its 24th meeting when we faced the unfortunate situation of not having sufficient time to fully discuss this very important topic. In its recommendation 2410, SBSTTA noted that the work on this issue was not completed during the 24th meeting and request the Executive Secretary to advance discussions on this issue prior to the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to facilitate focused deliberation on these issues at that meeting. So this forum has the very important task before it of providing outputs that can help accelerate deliberations on these issues at COP15. However, I wish to emphasize that the forum and the webinars are not negotiations, and we cannot work on crafting and revising specific text. So we don't have that mandate. Rather, we want to facilitate a discussion on the key elements that should be included in the COP15 decision on this issue and what considerations parties must address when discussing these elements. Let's also remember that this issue has been under discussions for a very long time. We've been addressed as early as COP13 in 2016 and COP14 in 2018, and we have been unable to find consensus on some of the key aspects on the discussion, which has hindered the EBSAs process to evolve and continue to provide up-to-date information to inform planning, research, and management. And as we cannot negotiate text, let's make use of this forum as a means to further discuss and explore various underlying reasons for these different positions and potential compromise options that can bring this issue to a resolution. I understand that the modality of using an online discussion forum may be new for many of you, although it's unfortunate that we cannot gather for an in-person meeting for these discussions. I urge you to make the best of this forum platform as a new innovative way to share our views. Finally, I'd like once again to thank our co-chairs, Mary-May Musungalis from Seychelles and Janusz Hennicke from Germany, and colleagues from the CBD Secretariat for your kind and active support in this process, and who will be assisting us during these days. Thank you very much to all of you for your time and your participation. I wish you a very successful discussion forum on EBSAs, and see you at the closing webinar. Thank you, and back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Hesikio, for those opening words. Certainly putting us in the right mindset of what we're hoping to achieve, and the context for all of this work. With that, I'd now like to pass over to Janos and Mary-May to give us a little bit more detail on the work at hand and the background and context and the objectives of our work. So please, Mary-May and Janos, go right ahead. I'll share the slides from my side.
Thank you, Joe. I'll be kicking off, but I'll look to Janos to see if he wants to say a few words before I get started. You're muted, Janos.
Thank you very much. I would have hoped I learned that by now. Thank you very much. A warm welcome from my side also. I'm really glad to be here, the co-facilitator, together with Mary-May, and I hope we will be as successful as we've been in the first online discussion forum, even though we are facing a slightly more problematic and difficult issue. And I think now, Mary-May, you will start and I will add something if necessary. So welcome, and thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Janos. And I think I'll just join in on the others. A substitute chair, and as Janos has indicated, we're very pleased that you've once again trusted us with the responsibility of being your co-facilitators. And together with the Secretariat, we've tried to put a few threads together for you this time to make sure that we can facilitate the discussions. So just by way of introduction, for the rationale of having this second set of webinars. So as most of you know who have been following this agenda item, at Subsidiary 24, that started last year online and that continued in Geneva, we were supposed to address two main issues, one being EBSAs and the second one being the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. So when we were in Geneva in March, we had one contact group session on EBSAs, which was only able to consider annexes 1 to 6, and annexes 7 to 12 and draft recommendations were not addressed. We know that we had the issue of not having enough time. And so therefore, during that plenary session, consideration was given, and the chair welcomed the possibility for parties to submit their views. And this has been compiled and has been presented as part of the documentations for this forum. Slide. Okay. So there we will have a few documents that have been made available by the Secretariat to facilitate your consideration of this item in the forum over the next couple of days. And these include the compilations of proposals. So parties and observers, they provided textual submissions on CRP4. And the Secretariat has done a wonderful job in compiling those into an information document, and whereby the submissions have been compiled paragraph by paragraph, in which we hope that you have had a chance to review. So you will see, as per the slide here, that this is a page taken from the compilation itself that shows the country and the submissions that they have made on the document. Slide. Moreover, there is a Substar recommendation document, 24/10, and this is the main document itself that is meant to come from Substar to be taken to the COP. And this is where you will notice that this document addresses the issue of unresolved discussions at Substar 24. It's also in this decision, or in this document, that we also included the provision for intersessional work to advance our discussions, and which we are doing by means of this online forum. And most of the substantive issues, they are then addressed as an annex to this document. So in the original CRP document, all of the annexes were part of the integral document, but following Substar 24, where we had that recommendation to include this intersessional work, this then became part of the key recommendation, and the substantive elements of the document was then transmitted as annexes. Slide. Okay, so therefore, over the next week, in a similar fashion, which the Secretariat will explain in a bit more detail just now, we intend for all of the delegates to exchange views on the recommended elements to address or to be addressed in CBD COP15 decision on this issue. We want you to build on the annexes of the Substar recommendation 24/10. Slide. So therefore, we recognize that there are quite a bit of issues that may come up, but we do want the discussions of this forum to focus on exchanging views on the recommended elements for this issue, as we had indicated, and with the key output that we're going to have a report that's going to come out of this forum, summarizing the key elements of discussions, similar to the one that we did for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity. We're going to have a report that's going to summarize the discussions for this forum, and it will be made available at CBD COP15 to inform the deliberations on a COP decision for EBSAs. So now I'm going to hand back over to Joe, who's going to walk you through and provide a little bit of context to make sure that all of the participants in the forum have the same level of understanding of the issues, and also facilitate for people to then be able to contribute actively. Joe, back to you.
Thank you, Mary May. So indeed, it's my pleasure now to give some background on the Ebsa process overall, the issues being discussed here, and the issues that have shown to be a bit problematic in recent deliberations regarding the future modalities for the Ebsa process. So some of this will be will not be new to many of you. You've probably seen certain versions of this presentation many times over the years, but to ensure we're all up to speed, I think it's important to give the deeper background on the Ebsa process and really what we're trying to achieve. So we have to remember that despite all of the difficulties that we've had in some of the deliberations, and many of those difficulties often more stemming from political issues rather than scientific issues, it is important for us to remember that the EBSA process was set up as it is a scientific and technical process, and set up with the intention of informing our efforts on where to focus our attention in efforts to achieve global goals and targets. So I think in that regard, it's also important to remember that the EBSA process really kicked off at CBD COP10. This is the COP by which the Secretariat was given the mandate to facilitate the EBSA process, which is the same COP, as we all know, where the Aichi biodiversity targets were adopted. So that question was very prominent in the minds of delegates there. You know, in the midst of all of these goals and targets that we have to achieve now, where do we focus our efforts and attention? And this is where the EBSAs come in, identifying and describing these special places in the ocean where you know, areas that are in need of increased research, management, conservation, and sustainable use efforts. Now, EBSAs, at least in the context of the CBD, the EBSA issue started at COP9, where the Conference of the Parties adopted the 7 EBSA criteria. And again, these are called scientific criteria. The actual proper term for the EBSA criteria, CBD scientific criteria for EBSAs. Now, these are 7 criteria that were adopted by COP9 as the basis for describing EBSAs. These are relatively general criteria, and they are crafted as such intentionally to be able to be flexible to describe a wide range of different types of features, habitats, and ecosystems. And certainly that kind of flexible nature is reflected in the suite of EBSAs that we have now after more than 10 years of the EBSA work. So at the subsequent COP, as I said, at CBD COP10, the COP gave the mandate and requested the Secretariat to facilitate a process by which we would support parties and relevant organizations in describing and mapping out ecologically or biologically significant areas through regional workshops around the world. So you can see there indicated on the map the scopes of the regional workshops. And aside from the Southern Ocean, which has its own process, and the Antarctic region through the CAMELAR process, and also with exception of some areas within national jurisdiction, we have a pretty good global coverage of areas of the scope of basically the areas that have been considered and the areas by which we looked for EBSAs. These workshops featured the synthesis of the best available scientific and technical information that we could find. We had, as many of you know, if you've been involved in these workshops, we have 2 very expert technical teams, one from Duke University, another from CSIRO, who worked for months before the workshops to put together the best available information, which was then submitted and provided for review by the experts at the workshop. So experts nominated by governments, relevant organizations, IPLCs, and in that process, that week-long process, having a very robust review of that information to see where certain areas may meet the EBSA criteria. So this was generally a very data-rich process. You know, for those of you that have been to a workshop, you'll remember either on the walls in the meeting room or in the hallways outside, that the technical teams always put up basically Ebsule wallpaper, we like to say, which is maps of all of the different information and you know, all these different maps of different types of features and biological characteristics and indicators of the region, and that's all really essential to the process. Just a reminder to keep our microphones off. Somebody's. So, but also what's important about this work is that it's an expert-driven process. It's not only based on the scientific information. Of course, it is based on the scientific information, but the expert input is really essential to interpreting that information and seeing where things are linked together, where there's ecological linkages, and even in some parts of the world, in some places where there's not robust information, having expert firsthand information and knowledge of those areas was actually really essential to describing EBSAs in many of these workshops. So here we can see just a snapshot of the EBSAs themselves. The more than 320 EBSAs, 321 to be exact, that were identified around the world. And then we have a new batch of EBSAs, candidate EBSAs that will be considered a COP15 for the Northeast Atlantic region. You see some little quick facts there about the sort of size and scope and scale and locations of these EBSAs. But the first thing that should pop out to you is that there are huge variations in size. Some of them are very, very broad features that almost span entire ocean basins. Some of them are very small, discrete coastal features. And again, this is the result of the fact that the criteria themselves, the EBSA criteria, are very flexible and general. And importantly, that EBSAs are not intended to be management tools. So they are intended to provide a scientific and technical basis to inform the efforts of competent authorities and governments, but they themselves do not prescribe any specific types of management tools, and thus are useful for a wide range of different types of planning and management. All of the actual information on the EBSAs themselves is housed at the Ebsa website, cbd.int/EBSA. And that map there, which provides the linkage to the descriptions of EBSAs, actually acts as the EBSA repository. So that's something that's useful to clarify here, is that I think there is a little bit of maybe confusion by some who are not super familiar with the deliberations as to what the repository is, what the EBSA information sharing mechanism is. Because the EBSA repository was set up for a specific purpose of actually being the official database of the EBSAs. So what that basically, what this website means is that we have one EBSA website, which as a whole serves as the information sharing mechanism, but the specific maps and descriptions of EBSAs, which you can arrive to by clicking on one of these links and clicking on one of these shapes and following the links to the CBD clearinghouse mechanism, that is what serves as the EBSA repository. So the only thing that goes on the map on the EBSA website, and the only thing that's linked to in the official EBSA list, and the only things that are contained in the clearinghouse mechanism are the EBSAs that have been considered by COP, at least for the moment. That's the process that we have so far. So that is what serves as the EBSA repository, for those of you that were wondering. So just to give us a little bit of a reminder, we always have to say this, it comes up quite often, but when people see shapes on a map, they inevitably draw conclusions about what that means or what that doesn't mean. But just a reminder that EBSAs are scientific and technical information on the ecological or biological features in the ocean. They don't prescribe specific management measures, and they don't say what activities should or should not take place in those areas or how those activities should take place. So they're not marine protected areas, although they're often confused for them because they are shapes on a map. They're not fishing closures. They don't deal with jurisdictional measures or jurisdictional matters. Instead, they're intended to inform interventions by states and competent intergovernmental organizations to inform their planning and management, or in some cases to just identify areas in need of further research. So there's a wide range of practical uses for the EBSA information, but they themselves, as I said many times, are not management measures. And actually, the COP has made this very clear very early on in the whole EBSA process, noting that the application of the EBSA criteria is a scientific and technical exercise, and that areas found to meet the criteria may require enhanced conservation and management, which can be achieved through a variety of means. But the selection of these measures is a matter for states and competent intergovernmental organizations. So key points to remember, as I said a number of times now, the EBSAs are a scientific exercise. They focus on features, and the EBSA criteria provides flexibility to describe and understand a broad range of different types of features. Some of you may remember last year we launched the EBSA impact study, which outlines progress and achievements over more than 10 years of the EBSA process. This is available online at the CBD Marine webpage, and this was produced thanks to support from the Japan Biodiversity Fund and in collaboration with Global Ocean Biodiversity Initiative. And it characterizes not only the progress that's taken place, but also some of the achievements that the EBSA process has been able to realize, including being the only intergovernmental process to focus on the inherent ecological and biological values of marine systems, providing a foundation for supporting integrated as well as sectoral ocean planning, spurring national and regional management capacity building, stimulating a multifaceted dialogue among different types of sectoral and cross-sectoral management bodies. And it has been used, and it has been used to inform efforts in different processes, including in some of the regional seas and the International Seabed Authority, for example. So coming back to the issue at hand, basically what we're talking about here in this draft, in this recommendation and draft decision for COP, is the EBSA process itself and the modality for the EBSA process. Now, the process that we've had for more than 10 years is what is displayed here in this flow chart. We first, the Secretariat convenes a regional EBSA workshop. The participants of that workshop, and actually the workshop as a whole, has to agree on the areas that the workshop feels meet the EBSA criteria. So those candidate EBSAs, let's say, go then to CBD Substa, which is supposed to provide the scientific and technical review of those areas, and then to the Conference of the Parties for a final review, at which point areas become EBSAs if they're included in the COP decision, and at which point they then go into the EBSA repository, and then we also transmit to the General Assembly and to other competent other competent authorities, and they're there and available to inform planning and management efforts in any way that they can. Now, there are some problems with this that we've seen. Well, not problems, but let's just say gaps or potential weaknesses. This was a really useful modality for us when we were going around the world. The initial, with sort of, let's say, the first run to try to just do the initial efforts to describe EBSAs. But now, after more than 10 years, we're seeing some issues that needs to be addressed and some things that have prevented new and updated information from being incorporated. So first is regarding the modification of EBSAs. We don't actually have a clear process at the moment for modifying EBSA descriptions that have already been considered by Substa and COP. We know that new research and data becomes available about features that are described as EBSAs that can, and this can actually in some cases affect the shape of the area or the ranking of the area against the EBSA criteria. We also have cases in which countries or regions have actually worked and been proactive to refine the EBSA information and now wish to have that refined EBSA information updated in the EBSA repository. We know that there's been some cases of incorrect or inaccurate information being used to describe an EBSA. Perhaps the information available at the time was shown later to not be totally accurate. We also have cases where previous information has changed. We know, for example, many global databases have and continually work to improve their information on different types of features. Features described as an EBSA may have shifted or changed location. We know very well that climate change is driving many changes around the world in addition to other processes and drivers. So it's important that the EBSA repository can reflect these changes and provide up-to-date information to inform planning and management. We also can have the case of a simple mistake in an EBSA description, perhaps a technical, linguistic, or editorial mistake. Actually, all of the EBSA descriptions that initially go to Substa and COP are drafted in a very tight time frame in the span of 1 week. And we in the Secretariat do our best to edit and to pick up any mistakes, but we're not machines, we're not computers, and sometimes mistakes do get through. And basically for all of these cases, we don't have a clear process to revise EBSA descriptions. So we're kind of a bit stuck with respect to areas that either areas that have changed or information that's changed for areas that are described as EBSAs. Now, the other major issue here is the process to describe new EBSAs. As I said, so far, the regional workshop process has been the only mechanism by which EBSAs have been described. The workshops have covered nearly all regions, but not all parts of those regions. As I said, there are some national jurisdictions that are not covered, and even still, many of the scopes of the workshops are quite big, and it's practically impossible to consider every aspect of all the different parts and depths and habitats in those huge areas in the span of a week. So there are some gaps even within the areas of workshop coverage. We're also limited by the expertise available at the workshops and practical considerations. So in most of these workshops, there's only 1 to 2 experts per country. And certainly not to diminish any of the scientific expertise of any of the parties, but one person often is not able to accurately deal with all of the information, especially in many very large countries or countries with very large maritime jurisdictions. So that's another limiting factor there. We also know cases of different countries conducting their own EBSA process or EBSA-like processes that have not been included in regional workshops. So some countries deliberately decided not to include their national jurisdiction in the workshop coverage because they had their own process that was ongoing at the time. We also have other intergovernmental processes that are conducting complementary exercises to identify important areas. For example, the work of regional fishery management organizations in identifying and designating vulnerable marine ecosystems, or the International Maritime Organization designating particularly sensitive sea areas for shipping. So basically, we don't have clear guidance from the COP on how to incorporate the outputs from national processes and what process within the CBD the outputs from national exercises should take, and we don't have a mechanism other than a regional workshop to describe new areas and perhaps to fill some of these gaps. So, for example, in some of the workshop coverage and some of the areas that have already been considered by workshops, we know that there's perhaps some individual spaces that, or areas or places that that may contain EBSAs, but that we were not able to consider at the workshop. Now, another regional workshop certainly perhaps could be convened in that region, but that's not maybe the most cost-effective way to do so. So, you know, there's a lot of discussion as to how we can fill in these gaps without having to go to the intensive effort and high cost of running a whole nother regional workshop for those regions. As Hesikio said, these issues have been addressed at previous COPs, at COP 13, COP 14, and again here at COP 15. But the nature of these deliberations has evolved over time. So I think there were different types of different ways that the discussions were set up at previous substas and COPs to try to find agreement. But really, the core areas of disagreement have largely remained. The discussions have also evolved through 2 global expert workshops, and the modalities that we have in the substa recommendation. The modalities that were and on the basis of what was included in the draft recommendation provided by the Secretariat is those are set up with the intention of drawing on and reflecting the history of discussions of these issues with careful considerations of the views and positions that have been expressed over time. So I think some experts may look at those modalities and think of very different ways in which it can be approached or can be resolved, or how it can be set up differently. But I think, you know, not to sound a bit cynical, but many of these other options probably have been considered in previous years and probably have been discussed over the many rounds of discussions that we've had. So I think how we're hoping to resolve this problem, how resolve these issues, is to focus in on the key areas of disagreement. And not try to reinvent the whole process and basically redraft the whole document, because we have, in addition to this being quite a long document with quite detailed modalities, we have to remember that COP 15 has a huge agenda before it with the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and we simply won't have time for robust discussions on all of these different issues, including on EBSAs. So to start to wrap up here, this has been an unprecedented global effort. We had over 500 experts from more than 140 countries, but we know that gaps remain, geographic gaps remain, scientific gaps remain. It was based on the really impressive combination of robust data and great input from experts around the world. But as I said, it reflects data that was available at the time. We weren't able to be 100% comprehensive of all data, and knowledge has evolved and grown over time. And similarly, with respect to the people who were engaged, it reflects expertise. The EBSAs reflect the expertise and knowledge that was present at the time of the workshop. And we also know well that we could have done better, and we need to do better to integrate traditional knowledge together with the information that's used to describe EBSAs. So again, there's some gaps. So looking forward, we know that there are environmental and human-driven changes in the ocean, developments in other global processes, as well as increasing knowledge and new methodological approaches that are really changing the landscape of scientific information on the ocean. We know there are other Ebsule-like processes taking place at different scales, at national, regional, and global levels. And we will have increased ambition set by the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that will require us to scale up our efforts. So overall, this tells us that the Ebsa work is not done. We need to fill gaps in the Ebsa process. We need to keep the descriptions up to date, and we need to figure out a way to incorporate work under other processes. So for all of these regions, COP15 has important decisions to make about the Ebsa process. So with that, that concludes my my briefing on the Ebsa background. And with your indulgence, co-facilitators, I can just give a brief overview of the logistics of the forum, if that's okay. I'll look for a nod from Mary May or Janos, unless you wish to hop in. Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So we will have time for discussion on these issues, but what I'll do now is just give a little overview of how this forum will proceed. And I'll share my screen again, so give me 1 second while I pull things up here. Okay. Okay, so this is the meeting web page. You can come to this web page by going on the calendar, the CBD meeting calendar. You'll see the online discussion forum indicated there as probably the first meeting, and I think it will stay as the first meeting for the rest of our time. Here we have the meeting documents webpage. So this contains the concept note, the subsidiary recommendation, as well as some information documents here, which the co-facilitators will describe in a bit more detail, and the notifications for this. But the important link here is number 3, and this actually is the link that takes you to the forum webpage. So this page here is simply to house the meeting documents. The actual place where the forum will take place is indicated and linked to in number 3 here, and where that takes you is here. So this is the online discussion forum page. And if you scroll down, you can see a description and some background on the issues are going to be addressed, the nature and the process for participating in the forum. And here, we don't have any threads uploaded yet, but basically this is the forum here where we will have discussion organized according to threads, and the co-facilitators will review those threads with us very shortly. Now, all of you should have been registered to be able to post in this forum. The forum is only open, the only people that can post in the forum are those who have been selected to participate in this forum and who have been indicated on the on the CBD notification that went around last week. But the forum will be public, so although others cannot post, they can see all of your posts. So that's an important thing to consider as well. So what I'll also do is just show you an example from the previous forum to show you how the actual posts work. So we had this previous forum back in June on the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. As you can see, it's all set up in the same way as the Ebsa forum. But here you can also see the threads. So we had threads organized according to different thematic issues, and those were in line with the paragraphs of the decision. Sorry, the draft decision and the subsidiary recommendation. Here we have the number of replies and the last post. So if you open one of these threads, you can see posts that were made by participants. And in fact, what you can also see is that the posts contain not only the information on who posted it, but when it was posted, and you are able to respond to someone else's post. So if you wish to comment specifically on an issue that was raised and respond or reply to another participant's post, you can do so, or you can post your own individual post on this topic. So also, I believe you can choose to be subscribed to these threads. And if you subscribe to the thread, you will receive automatic emails that will tell you when any new post has been posted. You may wish to do that to keep up with the flow of discussions, but I have to warn you that once the discussion gets going, you may receive a lot of emails. Every individual post will send you an email, so that's something to be aware of also. So I believe that should wrap it up in terms of the logistics. But just to say that, again, as a reminder, the meeting webpage, which has the documents, then coming here to come, number 3, to come directly to the online discussion forum on EBSAs. And we will be posting the threads very soon. Also, just to note that the forum itself is not open yet, so the forum is presently closed, but we will open it tonight. And with that, I will pass back to the co-facilitators and share my screen in 1 second. Okay. So I believe
Great.
this.
Thank you very much. Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very much for this very informative historical review, where we're coming from and where the EBSAs are coming from. I think this is very important for all of us, for this online discussion forum, but also for the deliberations at COP15, in which I think most participants to this online forum will also participate, that we know where we're coming from to be able to take things into the future and to move them along and develop them and develop the modalities. So now what we want to do is go quickly over the forum documents. Mary May has already mentioned 2 in the beginning of this forum, this webinar. You can find all the documents which are relevant to this forum on the meeting webpage. Joe has pointed it out. There's different groups, official documents, information documents, and notifications. The first one, on, of course, the core document is the Subsidiary Recommendation 2410. This is the main recommendation for the EBSA issues and the unresolved discussions at Subsidiary 24. So this is our foundation for all the discussions. And I think everybody is aware of that. If not, please, all the newcomers to this forum or to the EBSA process, read this document. This is very important. And I think next slide, please. Yes, Mary May has already pointed out also that at Geneva, since we didn't have enough time, parties and observers provided textual submissions, and they were compiled by the Secretariat, compiled, sorry, by the Secretariat, and put into this the second document, Compilation of Proposals. There you can find all the different interventions and proposals, textual submissions, which were made by contracting, by parties or observers. Next slide, please. And another very important document is what was done by the Secretariat with these proposals, with these textual submissions. And bravely, the Secretariat took on the task to produce a synthesis of these proposals. And you can find this in this synthesis document. And basically, it includes, or the task was to not to be too detailed, but somehow group and get the gist out of the proposals and put them into a new document in a structured way to highlight the main points and maybe not to go into too many details. So you can find all this in this document. It includes the proposals as well as proposals for new and or significant modified paragraphs. So please have a look at this. You can also refer to this when you make your interventions. Pardon? Hello?
No, I think somebody had their microphone on, so please go ahead, Jan.
All right. Okay. Next slide, please. Yes, and then we have the Subsidiary 24 briefing note, which provides information to inform on the Subsidiary 24 deliberations, and it provides background information on the EBSA issues at Subsidiary 24 and, of course, COP15, including the key areas which have to be discussed. Next slide, please. Yes, the schedule. We are now at the opening webinar, and as the previous online discussion forum on conservation and sustainable use, the whole forum consists of 3 parts. We have the opening webinar, we have the actual online discussion forum, and the closing webinar. In the opening webinar, well, we are right in the middle of it. You get an introduction to the forum and what we are trying to achieve in our discussions here. And then the online discussion forum starts, where the one registered can make or can post written comments on this webpage, and it will run from the 15th and 16th September. There will be no online discussion forum over the weekend, and then it will be resumed Monday and Tuesday next week. And on Wednesday, we'll have the closing webinar at the same time. And this closing webinar, we will try to come up with a summary of the discussions and lead you through what we've achieved and provide you guidance on the next steps. Slide, please. Right. You have been informed about your participation, but also about the other participants. In total, we have 57 participants from 40 countries and 17 organizations. Not all might be there now already, but I'm sure they will engage, or I hope they will engage in the online discussion forum and provide input for fruitful discussions on the different threads in which we will go to relatively soon. Now, next slide, please. I don't know what, I think there's one more. No, yeah, here we go. Right. So this was about the forum documents and a little background information, or more background information. And now Mary May and I would like to guide you through the different forum threads or the issues which will come up. And I hand over with that to Mary May for the first thread. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janos. So just diving in straight from there. So we've organized, so we will organize the forum into 4 main threads. So in thread 1, we would want to get your views on what you think should be the main recommendations, which we will bring forth to the COP for consideration and approval of the COP. It is going to be on the basis of those ones that have been provided here on the screen, and on those as part of that first thread. We may not necessarily have guiding questions, but depending on how we go with the thread, we might have to come in and provide some questions depending on how the posts are coming along when we put the forum live. Next one to you, Janos.
Thank you. Yes, thread number 2 is on annexes 1 and 2. Annex 1 are the general considerations on the modification of descriptions and, of course, new descriptions of EBSAs. And Annex 2 is information on the repository, Ebsa repository, and the information sharing mechanism. Now, general considerations, I think this is relatively straightforward. What has to be considered within the Ebsa process, I would like to point out again, and we cannot stress this enough. Ebsa process is a scientific and technical process. And of course, we're all aware that some issues are sensitive political issues, but we would like to ask all participants to focus on the scientific and technical issues. And Annex 2 is also very important with respect to repository and the information sharing mechanism, because as you will see in thread number 2 and 3, these issues arise, or their issue will arise. Where does the information of new or modified EBSA go to? Where is it being published, in the repository or in the information sharing mechanism? And their paragraphs or approaches how to do this in the other annexes. And with that, I would like to give the word again back to Mary for thread number 3.
Thank you. So for thread number 3, we will be focusing the discussions or seeking views on so the process for modification of Ebsa descriptions as contained in annexes 3 to 8. So as you can see on the screen on Annex 3, we want to focus on the reasons for modification of descriptions of Ebsas. Annex 4, proponents of the modification of description of Ebsas. Annex 5, modification of descriptions of Ebsas for editorial reasons. Annex 6, modifications of description of Ebsas within national jurisdiction, including Ebsas that are straddling multiple national jurisdictions. Annex 7, modification of description of Ebsas of areas beyond national jurisdiction. And Annex 8, modification of description of Ebsas in marine areas straddling areas within and beyond national jurisdiction. As you know, previously, some of these annexes have been covered, but for the others that haven't, we want you to give give us your views and reflections around the key elements that needs to be reflected in those. So don't focus so much on trying to provide exact wording, but more of the essence of what ought to be contained in each of those annexes. So thinking of potential compromise for the different options and and also to try and move past some of the already existing issues that some of you are aware of that started to come up when we were considering these different annexes. Over to you, Janus, for the final thread.
Yes, thank you. Thread number 4, the final thread, is on the description of new EBSAs. And it all looks relatively similar to thread number 3 with respect to the modification, so with what's in the title. But please be aware, this is all on new EBSAs. And of course, the same thing is true for thread 4, what Mary just outlined nicely for thread 3. So please have a look at what key elements should be incorporated or might go somewhere else. And if you have objections or problems with one of the paragraphs or annexes, please be constructive and say if you have a solution or what solution it might be, without going into text. Just give us a general idea where you see a solution, where we can merge different points of view. And with respect to thread 4, the annexes in detail, as with the modification, we have proponents for the description of new EBSAs. We have let's say the category of descriptions of EBSAs which are within national jurisdiction, including EBSAs straddling multiple national jurisdictions. Then, of course, we have the description of EBSAs which are fully in areas beyond national jurisdiction. This would be annex number 11. And last but not least, annex number 12 is probably the most complicated issue. The description of straddling EBSAs which are straddling both within and beyond national jurisdiction. This is certainly a tricky issue, but I hope that we can find conclusions and overcoming the problems which might be inherited in this situation. And I think with that we're through with the threads, and we would like to ask you if you have any questions. Thank you.
So similar like last time, if you have any questions, some initial views and general comments that you wanted to raise to ourselves and the Secretariat, so now is the time for us to take a few from the floor.
And just to note, colleagues, that there is a raise hand feature under the reactions tab, But if you're unable to find it, you can feel free to turn on your microphone. I see that co-facilitators, I'm not sure if you can see the list of participants with the hands. Okay, so I'll leave it up to you to moderate then. Please go ahead.
Professor Fuda, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mary, and Janice as well. This is the second time. It's good to see you in good health, and let us hope that this forum will make a genuine work in a way that we hope this time when we go to COP15.
Professor, can you come closer to the microphone?
Do you hear me now? Do you hear me? Hello? Do you hear me?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
better. Thank
that's
you.
better.
All right. Good to see you, and let us hope that this forum will be very important in a way that we can have a clean text in a way that it will be accepted by COP15. I could see that quite a large number of participants in this forum, the second one, and they are so diverse in a way that all of us we can contribute. So I don't have very specific questions, but I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we also hope to get many, many posts from you and responses on the others that come up during the next couple of days. Okay. All right, I am not seeing anyone else. Okay, I am seeing Daniela. Daniela, you have the floor.
Hi. Sorry, I was just wondering if there are any parties to that wish to take the floor before me. Thank you so much, Mary May and Janusz and Joe, for the great preparations for this forum. That is, as Dr. Mustafa said, it's amazing. It's a really important topic. One thing that I wanted to ask perhaps to Joe is when are we going to have a sense of the time that allocated to marine and coastal and EBSAs in the COP, just to know how much. Of course, I know it's an unrelated issue somehow because, of course, the forum is really important and we need to focus on that, but it would be good just to have a sense of when we can expect to have some sense of timing for those discussions to happen at COP. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. So the exact agenda and timing of the sessions at COP have not been provided yet. As you can imagine, it will be very complicated because we will have, in addition to the many issues that we normally have, and at a COP and COP decisions, we have post 2020 on top of all of that. So it's very complicated to put that schedule together. I'd also just wish to remind everyone that actually, for those of you that have participated in previous COPs and previous SBSTTAs, you would remember that our general practice is that the contact groups are decided by the COP chair. So actually, at recent meetings of the SBSTTA in Geneva and the working group in Nairobi, the practice of indicating contact groups before the session, before the meeting, is actually a new. It's not the normal practice of how we do things. And typically the contact groups are scheduled at the time of the COP on the basis of the interventions that are made, and also considering a number of other factors, including other sessions that are being scheduled. So first, we're still waiting for the schedule of when the sessions will go. And for the reason that I just noted, I myself, and perhaps the higher ups would know, but I don't know for sure if we will have the clear schedule of contact group sessions before the COP, as that is not the normal practice of how we do things. But in view of the very complicated schedule that we will have for post 2020, the COP president and the COP chair may decide to schedule beforehand. But for those, but at the moment we don't have that information as to when that will come or if it will come before the COP.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, we look to the floor for some other views. Okay, we check the chats. Okay, so there's Okay, there are no questions in the chat either. So, Joe, over to you. There are no further questions.
Sure. So we have lots of time left, and I think there's no problem for us to end early. We just wanted to give a big block of time in case people were particularly talkative, which they were in the previous forum. I just wanted to note, just to give some simple reminders that, and sort of touch on the sort of nature of this discussion. I think quite a few of us here were also participants in the previous forum. That forum was, and the topics being addressed was of a very different nature. We had it was a much more general recommendation. It was addressing a wide range of issues, and it was one of the reasons and one of the sort of focus of that forum was to give more space and time for parties and delegations to talk about the things that they wanted to see in that decision, because we hadn't had enough time to actually put all the things on the table that parties wanted to discuss. Here we have a bit of a different nature of a discussion, and in fact, from the perspective, I think, of the Secretariat, and you know, perhaps the co-facilitators may feel the same. I don't want to speak for them, but I think we need to avoid putting new issues on the table, but really focusing on the issues that we have that have been problematic and trying to find resolution. And largely, those are issues that relate to the role of SBSTA and COP in considering the outputs of, for example, national processes. What role should SBSTA and COP play in that? Where should those outputs go, depending on where and how SBSTA reviews them? So although we have lots of modalities, I think actually the really difficult, tricky, divisive issues are quite small, important, but small in terms of the broad scope of text that's contained in the modality. So I would encourage those of us who followed this and who are familiar with it to try to focus on resolving issues rather than trying to throw in new issues and reinventing the wheel. But now I see another good Ebsa colleague here with her hand up, Ms. Sophie. So please, Sophie.
Hi, everyone. And apologies for only raising my hand now. I didn't really know when the right time would be. And like you said last time, if my memory serves me right, we sort of already dived into the debate, because I remember putting some substantial issues forward at the first opening meeting of that forum. And so I didn't know whether we were supposed to do this now. But I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I did want to make some points because I think it might be interesting, complementing what the co-chairs have said today and the Secretariat as well. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for all the hard work, and especially the Secretariat, always behind the scenes, but always there to support us. So in these quite this very prolonged intercessional, I know that you've been working very hard, so my thanks again for that. Maybe just I just wanted to look at one or to highlight one particular let's call it sort of a red thread going through how I look at the annex, basically, that we have in front of us and that we wish to land on, or that we wish to agree on at COP. And I think that an important point that I would like to make is one that we struggled with internally in our Belgian delegation, in the European Union delegation, is the fact that we are confronted with two different, and I think I've said this before, but two different equally valid claims. The claim on the one hand, which is absolutely valid, that areas within national jurisdiction are only up to the sovereign states to take decisions on those areas, including EBSAs or parts of those areas that would be responding to or would be called EBSAs. But on the other hand, the other valid claim that decisions that have been made by an international body, such as a COP, can only be changed or undone or amended somehow by that same body. And so we were confronted with this duality where at the same time we had valid claims regarding sovereignty, but on the other hand, also valid international law claims. I'm calling them claims in the large sense of the word. And I think that we've all tried to be in this long intercessional very creative, and the seeds of this were actually already put at the COP, where we put our heads together, all of us, and we tried to come up with something that would not infringe on one of these claims. And I think that in the end, the not so beautiful, but probably the best way forward is to very clearly make that distinction between what can go into the information sharing mechanism and what can go into the repository, and where whatever will be put into the repository, I'm being very blunt here by saying it like this, but the price to pay for the entry ticket into the repository is to go through the entire process of Substa and COP. And whatever comes into the repository is not of more value than whatever is in the information sharing mechanism. It's simply a different place because of taking a different route. But that would be the distinction that can resolve this dichotomy or this duality, where you have the absolute right as a sovereign state not to go through Substa and COP. Then you simply put your equally valid information into another place, which is the information sharing mechanism. And again, looking back at this yesterday and today when preparing this meeting, I thought, well, this of course looks, it doesn't win a beauty prize or a beauty contest as many solutions that we often end up with in international negotiations, but it leads us forwards, and it helps us to keep this process in which all of us have invested so much to keep it relevant. And we really need to get this homework done at COP, because we need to show that the Ebsa process is still moving full speed ahead, and that this has a lot of value for all of our work, and that we just need to overcome this procedural hurdle. We cannot let that type of hurdle keep us stuck in a place when the scientific information is rushing forwards at full speed. So that would be, sorry, my long intervention, but just sort of to give the spirit in which probably most of my comments will be on the online forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I think indeed these are very useful reflections. And we know time and time again, I guess these are some of the issues that have been raised. But I think it will be useful in how you would be posting them into the forum to see whether you'll be proposing solutions or whether you'd be asking the questions that would then allow maybe the other delegates to share their views on how we can move past these procedural hurdles, because I think this is the space where we want to try and focus on the solutions and what these solutions could potentially look like moving towards the COP. And maybe if we can then sort of zoom down on a few solutions, then that could be good as an outcome of this process. I don't know if Janos want to also comment or reflect on that.
Thank you very much. I think you've said it all, Mary May, and I agree that already in the recommendation 2410 there are bits and pieces in it which you have just said, Sophie, and I think if we elaborate on that, and especially if parties or participants which have different views on that may come up with alternative suggestions how this
We lost Janos.
Hello?
Muted your, yeah.
It was frozen for a second, for a bit, Janos.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay, I don't know what you heard or what you didn't hear. Did you hear anything?
We heard a bit. Yeah, we heard most of it. I think it was only that last part, but not at least from my end, it froze a bit. Yes, towards the end.
Right. Well, basically, I was only pointing out that it would be nice if participants who have a different view on these things compared to Sophie, please come up with maybe alternative ideas how we can overcome these hurdles. This would be very helpful for the following process moving towards COP. Thank you. And I see some comments already in the chat. Please don't feel free to raise your hand that we can have your oral interventions. Thank you.
Okay, we have a few questions. We have one from Guy Lim, who, sorry if I'm butchering the name, my apologies, says if parties have contributed views and interventions during the previous SBSTTA, how best can we contribute this time around? So I suppose you would be in a position, if you wish, you could start a discussion around your previous submission to try and seek how others feel about the contributions that you've made, but also to try and see how your previous interventions actually fit in with some of the other views that may be brought up by the delegates during the forum. So it'll be like a conversation. So in essence, we would like to see when one posts that, other people can then engage with the content from other posts. So I think that can be a useful way that you can engage. Joe?
Yeah, just to complement that, I agree, but I think also that just to remind us that the views that were shared in and that are contained in the compilation document are text changes. So they're actually changes to the text. This is a good time to sort of give the flavor behind those text. If you're from a country that has submitted text changes, to give the reason and the rationale for why you feel a certain way or why your country takes this position, and to, kind of have a more of an informal space by which to explore different ideas and options, whereas the previous kind of exercise in SBSTTA was a much more text-driven, formal kind of process. So thanks.
Okay, we have another question also with regards to the presentations and if we can share them. From Mrs. Fatima Zra Hassouni. I don't know if you wish to take the floor or okay, if not, there is also a comment which we have taken note of. Okay, we have then Elva Escobar, who's saying contributing with solutions where these are needed. Elva, do you wish to take the floor?
Hi, actually, I really appreciate to be here and be able to speak. Janos, thank you. Actually, the comment was yours, and I really accept that, and I really look forward to be contributing with solutions and advance forward. That's what we actually need. I have been from the very beginning at the EBSAs, and I have seen them evolve, but I am also a scientist, and I have seen how science is changing and how we do science is evolving. So I see, because I have been also I am at the Ocean Decade, that there are these programs that are providing new possibilities. The way we do science in biodiversity, for instance, with the bond, allows us to network. So that's why I posted another comment about how we interact in science is evolving, and it will continue evolving. And in that way, networking of the repositories will be a way of strengthening the EBSAs and the Ebsa knowledge. But then I was starting to write, when you asked me to speak, about, I was writing about the digital twins in the ocean. as a future way of looking on how we will be able to forecast how EBSAs will modify and how we can probably suggest how to modify the EBSAs within and without, within and outside the exclusive economic zones. So this is what I think, that we will have tools in the near future that will allow us and give us strength to the EBSAs. Thank you, and I'm sorry for my extended comment.
That's okay. Thank you. That's
and thank you,
very
Joe.
welcome. And I think
thank you,
that's
Janice.
the space as well to start sharing some of those sort of preliminary thinking and get people to reflect even before the threads go live, you know, so they come with their little responses and ready to go.
So I will not post any more the digital twin option. I will go take it to the blog.
To the forum. There you go. Perfect. Okay, so I'm seeing another hand. I don't know if it's an old hand. Yes, Mr. Zakari Sohu. You have your hand up?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. You hear me?
Yes, we can.
You hear me? Okay.
Yes, we
Thank
hear
you
you.
very much. I'm So Zakari. Yes, I'm from Benin. I'm very happy to participate to this discussion. It's very interesting. I think that for what the procedure exposed by Joseph, I think that they should write it on like a document to share with all of us, because it's very important, very interesting to follow this this procedure to go ahead in all our country. Thank you.
Okay.
You hear me?
Yes, we heard you. Thank you. Joe, you want to comment on that?
Sure. Well, I think, as I said, we will share the recording of the presentation. If it helps, and if the co-facilitators agree, we can also send a PDF version of my slides as well, so you don't have to watch the whole recording of the webinar. So we can send those also together with the recording of the webinar. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. I don't see any further requests. Okay, there's a comment in the chat from Steve. Steve, do you wish to take the floor? Okay, maybe not. But he's saying the compromise seems that there will be different descriptions of EBSAs in the repository and the information sharing mechanism for those countries who chose a sovereign route for modifying or describing new EBSAs. Is this correct? Janos, you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve, for this question. This might be a compromise indeed. We are not supposed to give you solutions here, but we are looking forward to hear the solution from your side. But referring to Sophie's intervention, and if you follow this, or if you would accept that, yes, this would go into the direction, Steve, you're outlining. But of course, there might be different facets and solutions or compromises. Thank you.
Okay, it's our chair, the Substa chair. Ezekiel, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I've been listening to the questions and as a warming up session for the next days to have a fruitful exchange of views. Maybe it's worth to regard, at least from my point of view, to be all in the same page in terms to recognize the importance of these many years of efforts describing EBSAs, that we need to continue with the process. We need to finish all regions in the planet. As science evolves, we need to find the right way to update information on EBSAs in order to make them useful for decision making, and to have clarity and transparency where this information can be accessible, and to have this clarity on that Joe in presentation says that this is to recognize the importance of these areas from the biological and ecological perspective is not preempting or prejudging management, political elements, but is to describe where are important areas in the seas. I hope we all together are on the same page and try to find really the essence of every annex in the document and to see what is this what we want, and trying to take noise away and go straight to the essence to make this step forward and to open the spaces to continue finishing the process, to have the right information available, to have clarity in how to do it, and to continue providing important information independently of the different processes all around the world on plants. This is, I believe this is the main contribution of CBT to the world, using the best information available. I hope this can help to have clarity in how to move forward, and to provide these ideas, and that the report of this forum can be useful for parties during negotiations and to give clarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ezekiel, and I think it's really good that you brought us back into focusing on really getting people to think of those very, very critical things that they want to be reflected in the recommendations that we're bringing to COP in these annexes as well. So that's really helpful on this reflection. Okay, looking back on the list for any other speakers. I see none, so I think we might be drawing the meeting to a close. I'll hand the floor over to Janus for any final reflections on your end.
Right, thank you, Mary May. And thank you to all contributors for this discussion in the end. This was really helpful. And I think we saw that there's quite a few issues already coming up, and also some solution-oriented spirit, which is very good. And we look forward to an interesting and fruitful discussion forum. Please do not hesitate to post your ideas and thoughts, views, and also to reply to the thoughts and views of other people. It's not only about making your point, but getting to know the points and replying to the points of the other people in the forum. I think with that, I have no comments anymore. Thank you very much, everybody. And Mary May, do you want to close the meeting, or does Joe has to say or to add anything?
I look to Joe first, and then I'll go.
Yes, thank you.
Well, yeah, well, just also just to say, indeed, thanks so much to Mary May and Janos for doing this again, for their collaboration and leadership in this is very much appreciated. I just to encourage participants to use this this space productively. We only have a week, and what we saw with the last time was that there was a bit slow. It was a bit slow for people to actually start posting, but then towards the end we had lots of posts, and you know, it was actually a little bit tricky for us to sort of put them all together at the end in a short time frame to make the report. We have a little bit more time. We're not in as much of a rush to make the report, so we can have time to incorporate robustly all the input, but nonetheless, we encourage you to make use of this forum at the outset. And let's also remember that this is not a negotiation. So this is a forum for discussion among experts. So you don't necessarily need to feel as though your position or what you say will be taken as the formal position of your governments. And of course, all this has to go back to COP. But this will be a space for us to sort of help to build a mutual understanding of the diversity of positions and diversity of views, and why those views are held, which I think is really instrumental to finding some common ground. So also just to say, to remind everyone that the forum is not yet open. It will be open tonight starting at midnight Eastern time. And if you do have any problems connecting or logging in and posting, please let us know and we can try to resolve that for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. And with that, we want to thank everyone for your active participation. And we can close today's meeting. Thank you, Hezekiah, for also joining us and for all your guidance. We'll see you all next week after the forum. Bye-bye.